I'm Kim Leadbeater, the Member of Parliament for Batley and Spen, and it's really important that we're having this conversation about knife crime. And I know from my own very real personal experience the impact that a violent attack involving a knife can have.
When the police knocked on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning, I thought that Robert had been taken ill at work and he'd come home and I'd left the key in the back door and he couldn't get in, so I came down the staircase in just my dressing gown. And then you see 2 policemen stood there and you just think, right, and he's saying, is it Elaine? Yeah. He told me I needed to sit down, and he just said there'd been this attack, and unfortunately for Robert it was fatal. Robert, very easygoing guy, lots of friends, loved his music, played golf a lot. And Robert was the night shift manager at the establishment where he was killed.
Brad was, he was a cheeky character. He had a lot of friends, didn't he? A lot of humour. He was hyperactive, bouncy. He lit up any room, basically. And he was the kindest soul. He'd give a homeless man his last £5. It don't get easier. We just learn to adapt. We learn to adjust. We learn to live with it, don't we, really? It's not like people say it gets easier in time, which, in a way, that's how it looks. But it's not. It's just you do become accustomed to it, I suppose. Immune to it, if that's the right word.
It's really important that we have honest and open conversations with young people about the dangers and the impact of carrying knives. Whatever is going on in your life, no matter how bad things seem, carrying a knife is just not the answer. And actually, you've got to decide if you're a big part of the solution to some of the problems that we have in our communities, or part of the problem.
He'd gone out and he'd done the lock-up, which was just to lock a barrier gate across a car park. And he'd gone back in his office and he'd noticed on the CCTV that there were 5 youths on site. So they were all drunk and a little bit hyper, and he said he'd lost his phone. So Robert said, OK. I says, well, we'll help you find your phone. Robert and John came across it, but the screen had been broken. Because Robert's phone was on the torch, on his phone, the torch was on, he accused him of filming him. I think he then opened his coat and said, I've got a Sammy. Robert said, run. But unfortunately, as they turned, they held Robert back by his coat. John and Paul ran and they were trying to call the police. Horrific for them because they could hear Robert screaming. They inflicted over 100 wounds on Robert. They stood on him. They took his coat off and rifled through his pockets and paused for a bit of a break. And when the police arrived, they were attempting to decapitate him. They pleaded not guilty at first, and then the elder one pleaded guilty. The younger one didn't at that time. Just basically, I think he thought he were a gangster. I think he thought he was big and clever. Every one of us had to have counselling. I'm still on medication. My daughter suffered with PTSD.
We both live with anxieties. Bryce especially, but, probably more anxieties than me, in different ways to me. I get more overwhelmed if the situations, like, your everyday life, if anything sort of goes wrong, I find that really overwhelming. Whereas before, I could deal with situations. Bry's more social and separation anxiety, aren't you? And then I have my worries about Bry, my granddaughter, because I've witnessed for myself that life could just end just like that. And that's, and it's an anxious thought. I mean, Bradley was He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just going about his day. He wasn't causing any trouble. He was literally just going about his day, and within 5 minutes, he wasn't here. I think for me, you think it will never happen to you or somebody you know, and that is when it hits home. Because never in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought something like that would happen to my son.
Being a young person in this day and age is not easy. There's so much more pressure than when I was growing up. We know about social media, we know the impact that has, we know the pressures that creates for young people, and that's awful and it's really difficult. But if you are a young person and you're struggling and you've got problems, then reach out and ask for help. I've learned in my life that asking for help is actually a strength, it's not a weakness. So find someone that you trust, speak to a friend, speak to a teacher, speak to a family member, have that conversation about what's going on in your life, and try and find solutions that don't involve resorting to negative behaviours, whether that's around violence or knife crime or anything else. Don't ever be afraid to ask for help.